I was 36 years old when my son Ethan looked me in the eyes and said, "You protected everyone but me." In that moment, I felt the world stop turning. Those 7 words forced me to confront the painful truth of my choices, prioritizing my abusive husband's feelings and family peace over my son's well-being. Now I face the hardest journey of my life, rebuilding trust with my son and learning what real love and accountability actually mean. If you're watching this, please take a moment to subscribe and let me know where you're watching from today. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania where traditional values ran deep. My childhood home looked perfect, from the outside white picket fence, neatly trimmed lawn, and family portraits where everyone smiled on cue. But behind closed doors, my parents' marriage was a masterclass in dysfunction, disguised as normalcy. My mother was an expert at keeping the peace. When my father came home in one of his moods, she'd rush to fix his favorite meal or suggest I play quietly in my room. "Just don't rock the boat, Gracie," she'd whisper when I questioned why Dad could slam doors while I got punished for the smallest infractions. Men have their ways. Our job is to make life smooth. I watched her manage my father's emotions like it was her sacred duty. If he criticized her cooking, she apologized. If he spent money they didn't have, she worked extra shifts. If he made cutting remarks about her appearance, she'd laugh awkwardly and later buy new clothes she couldn't afford. The message was clear. His feelings mattered more than hers, more than anyone's. School became my sanctuary. I threw myself into academics, joining every club that would keep me out of the house until dinner. My teachers praised my drive, never knowing it was fueled by the desire to escape. By senior year, I had scholarship offers from several universities. I chose Northwestern in Chicago, 800 miles from home. College felt like freedom. For the first time, I could speak without calculating the potential fallout. I made friends who shared dreams beyond marriage and children. I planned to become an elementary school teacher, determined to create the safe space for children that I never had. Then I met Jackson during my senior year. He sat next to me in an education policy class, this business major, taking an elective that most of his peers avoided. Where they saw boring theory, he saw networking opportunities with future educators. That was Jackson, always thinking 3 steps ahead. "You're the smartest person in that room," he told me after our first class together. "The professor keeps looking to you for the answers even when he calls on someone else." No one had ever noticed me that way before. Jackson saw me, really saw me, or so I thought. He was charming, ambitious, and when he focused his attention on you, it felt like standing in a spotlight you never knew you craved. Our first date was at a jazz club downtown. He held doors open, asked questions about my childhood, and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. When I tentatively shared some difficult memories of my father, Jackson reached across the table and took my hand. "I would never treat anyone that way," he promised, "especially not someone I care about." I believed him completely. Within months, we were inseparable. My friends noted how quickly things were moving, but I dismissed their concerns. Jackson represented everything my father wasn't: attentive, supportive, ambitious, in ways that included me rather than diminished me. When he proposed just after graduation with a diamond ring I knew he couldn't afford on his entry-level salary, I said yes without hesitation. We married that fall in a small ceremony. My parents attended with tight smiles and a modest check. Jackson's family was warmer, welcoming me with enthusiastic hugs and promises of many happy holidays together. His mother whispered, "He's never been this happy," and I felt a surge of pride that I could give him what apparently no one else had. I secured a teaching position at an elementary school, while Jackson began climbing the corporate ladder at a marketing firm. Those early years of marriage seemed charmed. We rented a cozy apartment, spent weekends exploring Chicago, and talked about building a life that would be different from our parents. Diane joined the teaching staff a year after me, and we quickly became friends. She was divorced with a wry sense of humor about relationships. "He sounds too good to be true," she commented after hearing me gush about Jackson. I laughed off her skepticism, but sometimes caught her watching with concern when Jackson called multiple times during our after-work happy hours. As Jackson's career advanced, so did his stress levels. He began bringing work home, snapping at small inconveniences like a misplaced remote or dinner running late. I adapted quickly, falling into the familiar patterns I'd learned from my mother. Keep things running smoothly. Anticipate his needs. Don't add to his burden. When we decided to start a family 3 years into our marriage, I was ecstatic, but the pregnancy was difficult. Severe morning sickness left me hospitalized twice, and doctors eventually ordered bed rest for the final trimester. Jackson was supportive, but increasingly absent, claiming work demands couldn't wait. Ethan was born on a snowy January morning after 20 hours of labor. The moment the nurse placed him in my arms, I felt a fierce, protective love, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I promised this tiny person that his life would be different from mine. He would always feel safe, valued, and heard. Jackson seemed genuinely moved when he held his son, but something subtle shifted in him after we brought Ethan home. The baby's crying irritated him. The disrupted sleep made him short-tempered. The pediatrician appointments interfered with his work schedule. "Can't you handle this?" became his refrain whenever Ethan needed something. I reduced my teaching to part-time when my maternity leave ended, juggling an infant and a classroom of third graders, while Jackson's career continued its upward trajectory. Friends gradually stopped calling when I repeatedly canceled plans. Family visits became less frequent. Our world narrowed to the 3 of us, with me constantly mediating between father and son. 4 years after Ethan's birth, Lily arrived, a surprise addition that brought both joy and increased tension to our home. Jackson doted on his daughter in ways he never had with Ethan. "My princess," he called her while Ethan watched from the periphery. Ethan was a sensitive, thoughtful child from the beginning. At 3, he could sit for an hour with his picture books studying the illustrations with intense concentration. At 5, he began drawing elaborate scenes filled with colorful characters and detailed backgrounds. His kindergarten teacher called him unusually empathetic after he spent recess comforting a classmate who fell on the playground instead of continuing his game. These qualities that enchanted his teachers concerned Jackson. "Boys need to toughen up," he'd say when Ethan cried over a scraped knee or a broken toy. "The world doesn't reward sensitivity." I'd find myself torn comforting Ethan when Jackson wasn't around, while echoing some of Jackson's sentiments in public to present a united front. Family dinners became performances of normalcy. We'd sit at our oak table with Ethan carefully cutting his food into perfect bites. Lily chattering about preschool, Jackson questioning Ethan about schoolwork and sports, and me monitoring everyone's emotions like a weather forecaster tracking an approaching storm. "Did you win your soccer game today?" Jackson would ask, though he rarely attended Ethan's games. "We tied," Ethan might answer, "but I had fun." "Tied," Jackson's tone would sharpen. "That's not really an accomplishment, is it? Who scored goals?" "Michael scored 2 and Joey scored 1. And you?" "I played defense." "Defense." The word would hang in the air, disappointment evident. "Maybe next time, try to be where the action is." I'd jump in then. "Ethan's coach says he's the best defender on the team. He stopped 3 goals today." The lie would come easily, anything to deflect Jackson's disapproval. Ethan would shoot me a grateful look and I'd think I was helping him. I didn't realize I was teaching him that truth was negotiable, that feelings mattered more than facts, that protecting his father's ego was more important than honoring his own experience. As Jackson's career flourished, we moved to a larger house in an affluent suburb. Ethan changed schools in 3rd grade, struggling to find his place among children who had known each other since preschool. I noticed him becoming quieter, more withdrawn, but attributed it to the adjustment period. When he asked to quit soccer and take art classes instead, I nervously approached Jackson with the request. "Art," Jackson scoffed. That's not going to get him into college or teach him teamwork. Tell him to stick with sports for now. Maybe we can look at art as an additional activity if his grades stay up. I delivered the verdict to Ethan with a gentle spin. Daddy thinks you should continue with soccer for now since you've already started the season. But he's open to art classes next semester if you keep doing well in school. Ethan nodded, his disappointment evident but contained. He had already learned to manage his expectations around his father. Meanwhile, Lily blossomed under Jackson's adoration. By age 4, she had intuited exactly how to charm her father, tilting her head just so, using the baby voice that made him laugh, showing interest in whatever he was doing. Where Ethan received criticism, Lily received praise for similar behaviors. The disparity was subtle enough that I could pretend not to notice, but Ethan saw it clearly. "Why does Daddy love Lily more than me?" he asked one night as I tucked him into bed. He was 7 then, his blue eyes serious in the glow of his dinosaur nightlight. "Oh, sweetie, Daddy doesn't love Lily more," I assured him, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "He just shows love differently for boys and girls." Even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. I was teaching my son to doubt his own perceptions, to accept unequal treatment as normal. Our family vacations captured the growing divide. In photos, we looked picture-perfect, smiling at Disney World, building sandcastles on Florida beaches, hiking in national parks. The reality was tense negotiations over activities, Jackson's impatience with Ethan's pace, or preferences, Lily being carried when tired while Ethan was told to man up if he complained of fatigue. The first truly public humiliation came during a 4th of July barbecue at Jackson's parents' home when Ethan was 9. He accidentally spilled lemonade on his grandfather's golf clubs, which had been inexplicably left leaning against the patio table. "What is wrong with you?" Jackson hissed, grabbing Ethan's arm. "Can't you watch what you're doing for 5 minutes? Those are custom clubs." The entire gathering fell silent as Jackson continued berating Ethan, whose face flushed deep red with embarrassment. I stood frozen, aware of judging eyes, before finally stepping forward. "Jackson, it was an accident," I said quietly. "Let's get some towels and clean it up." Later, I found Ethan hiding in his cousin's bedroom. "Daddy didn't mean to get so angry," I told him. "He's just stressed about his big presentation on Monday, and Grandpa's clubs are very expensive." "I said I was sorry," Ethan whispered. "I know, sweetie. Sometimes grown-ups overreact. Let's go back down and have some ice cream, okay? Everything's fine now." But everything wasn't fine. That night, I heard Ethan crying in the guest room where we were staying. Instead of confronting Jackson about his behavior, I slipped Ethan an extra dessert and promised a trip to the bookstore when we got home. I was teaching him that emotional wounds could be bandaged with material comforts rather than genuine accountability. By the time Ethan entered 5th grade, he had developed a pattern of agreeable compliance at home while withdrawing emotionally. His grades began to slip from A's to B's and occasional C's. When I expressed concern, Jackson dismissed it. "He's getting soft because you baby him. He needs to learn that mediocrity has consequences." I began checking Ethan's homework, secretly helping him correct mistakes before Jackson saw his assignments. Another well-intentioned betrayal. I was protecting Ethan from immediate pain while undermining his ability to develop resilience and face consequences directly. Middle school brought new challenges as Ethan's anxiety symptoms became impossible to ignore. He developed stomach aches before school, especially on days with tests or presentations. He lost weight, his clothes hanging loosely on his increasingly angular frame. I scheduled a doctor's appointment without telling Jackson, relieved when the pediatrician found no physical cause but concerned by her recommendation for psychological evaluation. "He's just being dramatic," Jackson insisted when I gently raised the doctor's suggestion. "All that coddling has made him soft. He needs to toughen up, not get therapy." Jackson's promotion to marketing director that year required frequent travel, bringing temporary relief to our household tension. During these absences, Ethan would visibly relax, laughing more, talking freely at dinner, leaving his bedroom door open rather than shutting himself away. I took a part-time position as an administrative assistant at Ethan's school, ostensibly to align my schedule with the children's, but really to keep closer tabs on my increasingly withdrawn son. It was there I discovered he was being bullied. 3 boys from his physical education class had targeted him for his slender build and lack of athletic prowess. "Please don't tell Dad," Ethan begged when I confronted him about the bruise on his back. "He'll just say it's my fault for not standing up for myself." He was right, of course. I honored his request instead, meeting privately with the school counselor and principal. The situation improved after the boys received detention, but Ethan's relief was tempered with lingering shame. I had protected him from the bullies and from his father's judgment, but I hadn't taught him how to navigate conflict himself. The parenting divide between Jackson and me grew wider. I believed in supporting Ethan's natural interests and abilities. Jackson believed in pushing him toward activities that would make him successful by conventional standards. I worried about Ethan's emotional health. Jackson worried about his competitive edge. I addressed immediate problems. Jackson focused on long-term outcomes. Neither approach was entirely wrong, but the inconsistency was damaging. Ethan never knew which set of rules applied which parent's reaction to anticipate. He adapted by becoming hypervigilant, watching facial expressions, monitoring tone of voice, adjusting his behavior based on subtle cues that most children never need to notice. The explosion came when Ethan quit the baseball team in 7th grade. Jackson had insisted on baseball despite Ethan's preference for individual rather than team sports. 3 months into the season, Ethan simply stopped going to practice. When the coach called to check on him, Jackson was furious. "You don't just quit," he shouted, looming over Ethan in our kitchen. "Winners finish what they start. Is that what you want to be? A quitter who gives up when things get hard." "I hate baseball," Ethan said quietly, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. "I've always hated it." "You ungrateful." Jackson raised his hand, and I physically stepped between them. "That's enough," I said firmly. "Ethan, go to your room." "Jackson, let's discuss this calmly." After Ethan left, I placated Jackson with promises that Ethan would find another sport, that this phase would pass, that teenagers always went through difficult periods. Later, I went to Ethan's room, expecting gratitude for my intervention. Instead, he looked at me with something like pity. "You always do that," he said. "You protect him from getting too angry, then you tell me why I should understand why he's like that. When does anybody protect me?" His insight stunned me. Before I could formulate a response, he turned back to his homework, effectively dismissing me. That night, I lay awake questioning my choices, but by morning, I had rationalized my behavior as necessary peacekeeping. Ethan retreated further into online gaming, finding virtual friendships that required no physical prowess or paternal approval. He developed his artistic talents in private, hiding sketchbooks under his mattress after Jackson threw away his art supplies during an argument about grades. "Drawing cartoons won't get you into college," Jackson had declared while dumping Ethan's markers and pencils into the trash. "Focus on what matters." I fished the supplies out after Jackson left for work, returning them to Ethan with a whispered promise to replace anything damaged. He thanked me politely, but without warmth. Another Band-Aid on a wound that required surgery. Meanwhile, Lily, at age 8, had mastered the art of family dynamics. She knew exactly when to distract her father with a cute story, when to ask about his work, when to display accomplishments that would make him proud. She learned to redirect his attention when he began criticizing Ethan, not out of pure altruism, but as a way to maintain family equilibrium. Children shouldn't have to manage adults' emotions, but Lily had appointed herself assistant peacekeeper, following my example. My friendship with Diane became my emotional lifeline. Over coffee between classes or wine on Friday evenings, I would unload my concerns about Ethan, my frustrations with Jackson, my fears about our family's direction. "Grace," she said during one particularly tearful session. Have you considered that what you're describing isn't just a difficult family dynamic? There's a pattern here that sounds like emotional abuse. I rejected the term immediately. Jackson isn't abusive. He doesn't hit anyone. He just has high standards and a temper sometimes. His own father was much worse. Diane nodded patiently. Not all abuse leaves bruises, Grace. Sometimes the deepest wounds are invisible. I changed the subject, uncomfortable with labeling our problems in such stark terms. Abuse happened in other families, not mine. We just needed better communication, more patience. Perhaps family counseling, though. Jackson had vetoed that suggestion multiple times. When Ethan was 14, he experienced his first panic attack during a standardized testing session at school. The nurse called me to pick him up, describing symptoms that terrified me: racing heart, hyperventilation, dizziness, tingling extremities. He had been certain he was dying. The emergency room doctor ruled out physical causes and recommended psychiatric evaluation. This time, I couldn't hide the situation from Jackson. Anxiety, he scoffed when I explained the diagnosis. That's what they call it when kids haven't developed any resilience. When I was his age, I was working part-time and playing 3 sports. The doctor said it's a real medical condition, I insisted. He wants to refer Ethan to a psychiatrist. Absolutely not. We're not labeling him with some mental health diagnosis that will follow him forever. He needs exercise and less screen time, not medication and therapy. I took Ethan to 3 sessions with a therapist before Jackson questioned the insurance statements. Rather than confront the issue directly, I discontinued the appointments and told Ethan we would try other approaches first. The betrayal in his eyes haunts me still. By 15, Ethan had perfected the art of invisibility at home. He maintained passing grades, participated in minimal family activities, and spent most of his time in his room or at the public library. His once open face had become a careful mask that revealed nothing of his inner thoughts. One afternoon, while cleaning his room, an invasion of privacy I justified as motherly concern, I found a journal tucked between his mattress and box spring. I stood for long minutes debating whether to open it, finally deciding that my worry outweighed his right to privacy. What I read shattered my carefully constructed illusions. Sometimes I think about just disappearing. Not dying, I don't want that, but just going somewhere where no one knows me or expects me to be someone I'm not. Mom tries, I guess, but she always chooses him in the end. She thinks she's protecting me, but all she's doing is teaching me to accept being treated like I don't matter. I closed the journal and returned it to its hiding place, sick with the realization that my son saw through all my rationalizations. Still, I said nothing, respecting the privacy I had already violated by not mentioning the discovery. A week later, the school counselor called to inform me that Ethan had skipped 3 days of classes the previous week. When confronted by a teacher, he had simply shrugged and walked away. That evening, I waited until Jackson had retreated to his home office before approaching Ethan's closed door. My knock was met with the muffled, "What? Can we talk?" I asked, entering to find him at his computer with headphones around his neck. "About the school called. You've been skipping classes." His expression didn't change. "And, Ethan, this isn't like you. What's going on?" He laughed, then a sound so bitter it felt like a slap. "What's like me, Mom? Do you even know who I am anymore?" The question stopped me cold. When had I last really seen my son? Not the image I maintained of him, not the child I thought I was protecting, but the actual person he had become. "I'm trying to understand," I said weakly. "No, you're trying to fix a problem so Dad doesn't find out, and things can keep running smoothly. That's different from understanding." Before I could respond, he mentioned Marcus, for the first time a classmate he had apparently befriended months earlier without my knowledge. "Marcus gets it. His dad's the same way. The difference is his mom actually stood up and left when things got bad." The comparison stung, but I pushed past it. "I'd like to meet Marcus." Ethan shrugged. "Whatever, it won't matter. Dad will hate him because he's got blue hair and listens to music you guys don't approve of. He was right. When Jackson eventually met Marcus, he immediately labeled him a bad influence and forbade Ethan from spending time with him. I watched Ethan retreat further inward, his last connection seemingly cut. Secretly, I arranged for Ethan to see Marcus after school under the guise of study sessions at the library. Another well-intentioned deception that taught exactly the wrong lesson, that honesty was less important than avoiding conflict, that relationships required subterfuge to survive in our home. The situation deteriorated further during preparations for Lily's 13th birthday. Jackson insisted on an elaborate party with dozens of guests, catering, and professional decorations. Lily, delighting in the attention, became increasingly demanding and entitled as the event approached. Ethan watched the extravagance with thinly veiled resentment. His own birthday the previous month had been marked with a simple family dinner and a few practical gifts. When he pointed out the disparity, Jackson dismissed his concerns. "Your sister is more social. She has more friends to celebrate with." The unspoken message was clear: Lily deserved celebration. Ethan did not. The week before the party, Jackson announced a dinner with his company's CEO. Attendance was mandatory for the entire family. "I can't go," Ethan said immediately. "I have a major art project due." "Reschedule it," Jackson replied without looking up from his phone. "This dinner is important for my career." "I can't reschedule a group project. Other people are counting on me." Jackson's face darkened. "You will be at this dinner, Ethan. End of discussion." I stepped in with my usual mediation. "Ethan, this is really important for Dad. Maybe you could work on your part of the project early." The betrayal in Ethan's eyes was immediate. Once again, I had chosen Jackson's priorities over his. Still, he attended the dinner silent and withdrawn, in a button-down shirt that already looked too small for his rapidly growing frame. Throughout the evening, Jackson made pointed comments about Ethan's appearance, his grades, his lack of extracurricular activities, all framed as jokes, but landing like punches. I smiled tightly, changed subjects, and later told Ethan his father was just nervous about impressing his boss. That night, Ethan asked the question that would later haunt me: "Why do you always take his side?" I gave him platitudes about family unity and seeing different perspectives. But the truth was simpler and more shameful. I was afraid. Afraid of Jackson's anger, afraid of conflict, afraid of acknowledging that my marriage had become something unhealthy. I had convinced myself that my peacekeeping protected both children, when in reality, it only protected me from having to take a stand. A week later, Ethan's art teacher emailed me with concerns about his recent work, dark, isolated figures, and landscapes that suggested significant emotional distress. She recommended a meeting with the school counselor, who in turn suggested a comprehensive mental health evaluation. This time, I couldn't ignore the professional's concerns or hide them from Jackson. I showed him the email and the sample artwork the teacher had shared. "This is ridiculous," he said dismissively. "It's just teenage angst and melodrama. When I was his age, this isn't about you." I interrupted, surprising both of us. "This is about Ethan, and something is seriously wrong." Jackson stared at me, unused to contradiction. "So now you're an art critic and a psychiatrist. He's manipulating you for attention." "Or maybe he's telling us something the only way he knows how," I countered. "I'm making an appointment with the therapist the school recommended. Ethan needs help. What he needs is discipline and structure. These mental health people just want to put kids on medications and blame parents for normal teenage rebellion." The argument escalated, with Jackson eventually dismissing the entire situation as coddling. I retreated to my familiar role of peacekeeper, promising to think about it more, rather than holding firm. That evening, Ethan arrived home to find us in tense silence. He headed straight for his room as usual, but Jackson called him back. "Your mother tells me your art teacher is concerned about your weird drawings." Ethan froze, then turned slowly. "My art isn't weird. It's just not full of rainbows and puppies." Don't get smart with me, Jackson warned. We're not wasting money on therapy because you want to draw depressing pictures for attention. Jackson, I began, but he cut me off. No, Grace. He needs to hear this. The real world doesn't care about your feelings or your self-expression. The sooner he learns that, the better. Ethan's face hardened. You don't know anything about the real world. You live in this perfect bubble where everyone has to orbit around you and your feelings. Watch your mouth, Jackson warned. Or, what you'll throw away more of my stuff, take away more privileges. What else is there to take? Jackson stepped forward menacingly. Your attitude is the problem. That computer you spend all your time on, maybe that should go until you remember how to speak to your father. Before I could intervene, Jackson stormed into Ethan's room and unplugged his laptop, the one connection Ethan had to his online friends and creative outlets. Dad, stop! Ethan shouted, following him. All my schoolwork is on there. You should have thought about that before being disrespectful. I hurried after them, watching in horror as Jackson held the computer over the hardwood floor. Jackson, don't, I began, but it was too late. He dropped the laptop, the crack of breaking electronics echoing through the house. Lily appeared in her doorway, eyes wide with alarm. Ethan stood absolutely still, staring at his broken computer. When he finally looked up, his eyes were dry, but his voice shook with emotion I had never heard before. You protected everyone but me. 6 words that sliced through 15 years of self-deception. The silence after Ethan's statement seemed to stretch into infinity. No one moved. No one spoke. The broken laptop lay between us like physical evidence of all our broken promises. Then Ethan simply walked past us down the stairs and out the front door. No dramatic slamming, no shouting, just quiet, deliberate steps and the soft click of the door closing behind him. Jackson recovered first. See what happens when you undermine my authority? He thinks he can just walk out whenever he wants. I stared at my husband as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Our son is in pain, I said quietly. And you just destroyed his computer. It's my computer. I paid for it, and he needs to learn. No. I interrupted, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. You need to learn. That was cruel and unnecessary. I left him standing there and went downstairs to call Ethan, but my call went straight to voicemail. A text message followed. I'm at Marcus's. Don't worry. When I relayed this to Jackson, his reaction was predictable. Call him right now and tell him to get home. He can't just run away when he doesn't like the consequences of his actions. I think he needs some space, I replied. And honestly, so do I. That night was the first time I slept in the guest room lying awake as memories replayed in excruciating detail. Moments when I had chosen peace over protection. Times I had explained away Jackson's behavior rather than confronting it. Opportunities to stand with Ethan that I had missed out of fear or misplaced loyalty. Morning brought no clarity, just exhaustion and the weight of decisions too long deferred. Lily found me in the kitchen, her face pinched with worry. Is Ethan coming home today? The simple question revealed how much she had absorbed about our family dynamics. At 13, she was already an expert at reading emotional currents and anticipating storms. I'm not sure, sweetie, I answered honestly. Ethan's very upset right now. She nodded sagely. Dad shouldn't have broken his computer. No, he shouldn't have. But you guys fight a lot. She continued, watching me carefully. Ethan never does what Dad wants. I recognized the implicit comparison. Lily always did what Jackson wanted, and she was rewarded for it. I had taught her this strategy by example, and the realization made me ill. Sometimes doing what someone wants isn't the right thing, I said carefully. Sometimes standing up for yourself is more important than keeping the peace. Her eyes widened slightly, recognizing the shift in family doctrine. Before she could respond, my phone rang. Marcus's mother, Karen. "Grace, I thought you should know Ethan's here. He's safe, but he's pretty upset." Relief washed over me. "Thank you for calling. Is it okay if he stays there for now?" "Of course," she answered without hesitation. "He's welcome here as long as needed." The lack of questions spoke volumes. Had Ethan shared enough about our home life that this woman already understood the situation? The thought was humbling. "Can I talk to him?" There was a pause. "He doesn't want to talk right now, Grace. He asked for some time." After hanging up, I spent hours researching family dynamics and emotional abuse terms I had previously rejected. The descriptions felt like reading my own biography: the walking on eggshells, the hypervigilance, the rationalization of increasingly controlling behaviors. Most painful were the descriptions of children in such households, their damaged self-esteem, their difficulties with healthy relationships, their belief that love meant sacrifice and suffering. Was this what I had taught my son? When Jackson emerged from his home office that evening, he acted as if nothing unusual had happened. "Is dinner ready? Where's Ethan?" "Still at Marcus's," I replied. "And no, dinner isn't ready. I think we need to talk about what happened yesterday." His face darkened. "What's to discuss? He was disrespectful. He faced consequences. End of story." Breaking his computer wasn't a consequence, Jackson. It was destruction of property and intimidation. He stared at me, unused to direct confrontation. "Since when did you become so dramatic? It's a computer. I'll buy him another one when he apologizes and demonstrates better behavior." "That's not the point," I insisted. "This isn't about the computer. It's about how we treat Ethan, how you treat him, and how I've allowed it to happen." "Oh, so now I'm the villain? I'm the only one trying to raise that boy to survive in the real world while you coddle him and make excuses for his behavior?" "The real world isn't supposed to be his own home," I shot back. "He should feel safe here, not like he's constantly being judged and found wanting." The argument continued without resolution, ending with Jackson retreating to his office with a slammed door. I called my sister Laura, whom I had barely spoken to in years as my world had narrowed to managing our household tensions. "I've been waiting for this call," she said after I explained the situation. "Do you remember what I said at your wedding?" I did remember. "You said you hoped I wasn't making the same mistake Mom did." I saw it then, Grace. The way he talked over you. The way you changed your opinions to match his. I just hoped I was wrong. The next day, I arranged to meet Ethan at Grant Park, a neutral location where we had once fed ducks together when he was small. He arrived looking exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. But there was also something different about him, a straightness to his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for coming," I began. He nodded without speaking. "Ethan, what you said yesterday, about me protecting everyone but you. You were right." The admission seemed to surprise him. He had expected excuses, perhaps, or the usual attempts to smooth things over. "I've been thinking about it all night," I continued. "About all the times I tried to keep the peace instead of standing up for what was right. About how I taught you that your feelings mattered less than avoiding conflict." "Why?" he asked simply. Such a small word for such a complex question. "I thought I was protecting you," I said finally. "I thought if I could manage your father's moods, if I could make everything run smoothly, you and Lily would be spared the kind of childhood I had. But instead, I just created a different kind of damage." "You always take his side," Ethan said quietly, "even when you know he's wrong." "I do," I admitted, "and I can't promise I'll suddenly be perfect at standing up to him. These patterns go deep, Ethan, but I can promise I'll try to do better. That I see what's happening now, and I won't pretend anymore." He looked at me for a long moment. I don't think I can come home right now. The words hurt, but I understood. Karen said you can stay with them for a while. I think that's a good idea, actually. It gives everyone some space to think. Dad will be furious. Probably. But that's not your problem to manage. It's mine. We talked for nearly 2 hours, truly talked in a way we hadn't in years. Ethan shared how he had felt invisible at home unless he was doing something wrong, how he had learned to make himself small to avoid criticism, how watching me absorb his father's moods had taught him that love meant sacrificing your own needs and feelings. I returned home to find Jackson had enlisted his parents' support. They sat in our living room like a tribunal expressions grave as Jackson explained his version of events, Ethan's disrespect, my undermining of parental authority, the unnecessary drama over normal teenage rebellion. Where is Ethan now? His mother asked. Staying with a friend's family, I replied. He needs some time away from home. You allowed this, his father demanded. Grace, that boy needs discipline, not coddling. What he needs is to feel safe and valued, I countered. Something that hasn't been happening in this house. The intervention-like meeting devolved quickly with Jackson's parents reinforcing his perspective, while I stood increasingly alone. By evening's end, I had been cast as the villain undermining proper parenting, while Jackson was the reasonable authority figure dealing with difficult circumstances. They left with promises to help Jackson handle the situation, as if my son's pain was merely a public relations problem to manage. That night, I slept in Ethan's room, surrounded by evidence of his inner world sketches, taped discreetly behind his desk books, carefully organized by author, the broken remains of his computer still on the floor, where Jackson had dropped it. The next morning, I made an appointment with a family therapist, not for all of us, but for myself. I needed to understand how I had become the person who would choose peace over protection, who would sacrifice her child's emotional well-being to avoid conflict. Dr. Marilyn Bennett was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that cut through my practice narratives. In our first session, she asked the question that would shape my journey. What did you learn about love in your childhood home? The answer came with surprising clarity. That love means making yourself smaller to make room for someone else's feelings. That keeping the peace is more important than being honest. And what message do you think Ethan has received about love in your home? I closed my eyes against the pain of recognition. That he's not worthy of protection. That his feelings matter less than his father's. That love is conditional on meeting impossible standards. Dr. Bennett nodded. Generational patterns are powerful, Grace. You've been repeating what you learned from your mother. The question now is, are you willing to break that cycle, even if it means facing significant discomfort and conflict? That question stayed with me as I drove to visit my mother, something I rarely did, despite living only an hour away. She seemed surprised to see me arrive unannounced on a Tuesday morning. Grace, is everything all right? We sat at her kitchen table, the same one where we had eaten silent dinners during my father's rages, where she had taught me to smooth things over rather than stand firm. Mom, why did you never stand up to Dad? Why did you teach me to manage his moods instead of holding him accountable? Her face paled. That's ancient history, Grace. What brings this up now? I told her about Ethan, about Jackson, about the patterns I was finally seeing clearly. As I spoke, her eyes filled with tears. I thought I was protecting you, she whispered. I didn't know how to leave. I didn't have money or skills or anywhere to go. Keeping the peace was the only protection I could offer. But it wasn't protection, I said gently. It taught me to accept treatment that wasn't okay. And now, I've taught Ethan the same thing. She reached across the table to take my hand. Are you saying Jackson is like your father? Not exactly, but the dynamic is similar. And I've been playing your role perfectly. We talked for hours, unraveling decades of family patterns. Before I left, she hugged me tightly. Break the cycle, Gracie. Be braver than I was. With Ethan still at Marcus's house, I arranged for him to stay with my sister temporarily. Laura, a successful attorney with a spare bedroom and no children of her own, was happy to provide a neutral space while we sorted through our family issues. He can stay as long as needed, she assured me. And Grace, I'm proud of you for finally seeing what's been happening. The first family therapy session was a disaster. Jackson attended only after I made it clear that our marriage depended on it. He spent the hour alternating between charming the therapist and subtly undermining my concerns. Grace has always been sensitive, he explained with a smile. And Ethan takes after her. I'm just trying to prepare him for a world that won't accommodate his every feeling. Dr. Bennett was not easily manipulated. It sounds like you have strong beliefs about how boys should behave, she observed. Where do those beliefs come from? Jackson's mask slipped momentarily. My father taught me that respect and discipline are the foundations of manhood. Ethan lacks both. And what happens when Ethan doesn't meet your expectations? Reasonable consequences, Jackson replied smoothly, which Grace undermines at every turn. After the session, Jackson's anger was palpable. That was a waste of time and money, he declared on the drive home. That woman has no idea about raising sons. I thought she asked important questions, I replied, feeling a new steadiness in my voice. Questions we need to answer honestly if we want Ethan to come home. If there is no if, he's our son. He lives in our house. This little rebellion ends now. I took a deep breath. Not yet. He needs time, and so do we. I've scheduled another appointment for next week. Jackson's expression darkened. I won't be attending. This therapy nonsense just encourages everyone to blame me for normal parenting. True to his word, he refused further sessions. I continued alone, gradually understanding how my own upbringing had prepared me to accept and enable behaviors that damaged my son. Meanwhile, I met with Ethan's school counselor to develop a support plan. We arranged for him to temporarily submit assignments online while staying with Laura and to meet regularly with the school psychologist when he returned. Ethan has significant anxiety and signs of depression, the counselor explained gently. These aren't character flaws or teenage rebellion. They're responses to his environment. At home, I began standing firm in small ways, refusing to make excuses for Jackson's behavior, challenging his criticism of Ethan, insisting on respect for my opinions. Each small act of courage built on the previous one, though the discomfort of conflict never fully dissipated. Lily watched these changes with confusion and concern. At 13, she had perfected the art of managing her father's moods and securing his approval. Now those skills seemed suddenly devalued. Why are you and Daddy fighting all the time? She asked one evening as I helped with her homework. And why won't Ethan come home? I chose my words carefully. Sometimes families develop patterns that aren't healthy for everyone. Right now, we're trying to change some of those patterns so Ethan can feel safe and happy at home. But Dad says Ethan is just being difficult. Your father and I see things differently right now, but I want you to know something important, Lily. You never have to earn love by making yourself smaller or by managing other people's feelings. Real love doesn't require that. Her brow furrowed. But you always told me to be extra nice when Dad has a hard day at work. The innocent observation cut deep. I had indeed taught both my children to orbit around Jackson's moods to adjust their behaviors based on his emotional weather. Lily had simply learned the lessons better than Ethan had. I was wrong, I told her simply. We shouldn't have to walk on eggshells in our own home. I began reaching out to other parents, building a support network I had allowed to atrophy over years of isolation. I joined a support group for parents of teens with anxiety, finding comfort in stories that paralleled my own and wisdom from those further along the healing journey. Ethan's communication remained minimal, but gradually thawed. He would respond to my texts, occasionally call to discuss practical matters, and agree to weekly dinners at a restaurant midway between our house and Laura's apartment. During one such dinner, sitting in a booth at a pizza place Ethan had loved as a child, we had our first genuine conversation in years. "I've been thinking about what you said at the park." He began carefully folding his napkin into smaller and smaller squares. "About how you thought you were protecting me." "I did think that," I acknowledged. "I was wrong." "The thing is," he continued, "I always knew Dad was unfair. What hurt more was watching you agree with him even when your face showed you didn't. It made me feel crazy, like I couldn't trust what I was seeing or feeling." "Gaslighting," I said quietly. "There's a term for that, making someone doubt their own perceptions. I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but intent doesn't change the impact." He nodded, meeting my eyes directly. "I don't hate you, Mom. I was just disappointed. All the time." The simple honesty broke my heart and gave me hope simultaneously. "I'm trying to earn back your trust," I told him. "Not with words, but with actions. It won't happen overnight." "I know," he said. Then unexpectedly, he smiled, a small, tentative expression that reminded me of his childhood self. "Laura says you've got a backbone growing. Says it's about damn time." That made me laugh, releasing some of the tension between us. Your aunt never was one to mince words. As weeks passed, I made a decision that would change everything. I applied to return to full-time teaching. The additional income would give me financial independence, something I now recognized as essential for any future choices I might need to make. Jackson viewed my decision as a betrayal. "We agreed you'd work part-time to be available for the kids," he argued. "This is completely unnecessary. Lily is 13 and rarely home anyway. And this is necessary for me," I countered. "I miss teaching full-time. I miss having my own professional identity." The argument escalated when I refused to attend a dinner with Jackson's colleagues because it conflicted with my scheduled time with Ethan. "This dinner is important for my career," Jackson insisted, his voice rising. "Ethan can wait another week." "No," I said simply. "I promised Ethan I'd be there, and I'm keeping that promise. Your colleagues will understand a family commitment." "This is what I'm talking about," Jackson exploded. "Ever since Ethan's little drama, you've completely changed. Everything revolves around his demands now." "Not demands, Jackson. Needs. There's a difference." That night, after he stormed out to attend his dinner alone, I packed 2 suitcases, one for myself and one for Lily. Something had shifted fundamentally inside me. I could no longer pretend that our home was healthy for either of my children. The next morning, I asked Lily to sit down for a difficult conversation. "Sweetheart, I've decided that we need some time away from this house. I found a small apartment near your school where we'll be staying for a while." Her eyes widened in alarm. "Are you and Daddy getting divorced?" "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "Right now, we're separating, so everyone has space to think about what kind of family we want to be." "Does Ethan know?" "Not yet. We'll tell him together later today." She was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, "Will I still see Daddy?" "Of course. This isn't about keeping you from your father. It's about creating a healthier environment for all of us." That afternoon, I filed for legal separation and moved Lily and myself into a small 2-bedroom apartment near her school. The modest space felt more like home than our beautiful house had in years. The first months of separated life brought both challenges and unexpected relief. The practical difficulties of reduced finances and shared custody were balanced by the emotional freedom of living without constant tension. Jackson alternated between attempts to win me back and bitter accusations about my destruction of our family. He hired an aggressive attorney who portrayed me as unstable and Ethan as manipulative. The legal process was exhausting, but I found strength I hadn't known I possessed. Ethan gradually began spending weekends at my apartment. His presence tentative at first, then increasingly comfortable. His room was small, nothing like his spacious bedroom at home, but he seemed to relax there in ways he never had in our house. "It's quiet here," he observed one evening. "Not like quiet because everyone's walking on eggshells, but actual peaceful quiet." Lily struggled more with the transition. She missed her father, her larger bedroom, the material comforts of our previous life. More significantly, she missed her role as the family favorite, the peacekeeper, who could smooth troubled waters with a well-timed joke or display of affection. "Why can't you just try harder to work things out with Dad?" she asked repeatedly. "Everyone's parents fight sometimes." I sat with her on her bed, surrounded by the stuffed animals she claimed to have outgrown but had insisted on bringing. "Lily, what was happening in our house wasn't just fighting. It was a pattern that was hurting Ethan and teaching both of you unhealthy lessons about relationships." "But Dad loves us," she insisted. "He does." I agreed. "And love should make you feel safe, valued, and respected. Did Ethan seem happy in our house?" She considered this. "No, he was always in his room or quiet at dinner." "And did you notice how differently Dad treated you compared to Ethan?" Her eyes dropped. "Dad says it's because I try harder to make him happy." The innocent statement revealed so much about what I had allowed to happen. "It's not your job to make adults happy, Lily. That's backward. Parents are supposed to help their children feel secure and loved, not the other way around." Both children began individual therapy, revealing different impacts from our family dynamics. Ethan's therapist focused on his anxiety, depression, and the hypervigilance he had developed. Lily's worked on her tendency to suppress her own needs to gain approval, and her manipulation of others' emotion skills she had developed watching me. I made a painful public apology to both children during a family therapy session without Jackson, who had refused to participate. "I failed you both," I acknowledged, fighting back tears. "Ethan, I failed to protect you from criticism and emotional harm. Instead of standing with you, I taught you to doubt your own feelings and accept treatment you didn't deserve. Lily, I taught you that love means making yourself smaller and managing others' emotions. I modeled unhealthy relationship patterns that you began to copy. I am deeply sorry for these failures, and I commit to doing better moving forward." Ethan listened with solemn attention. Lily cried. Neither offered immediate forgiveness, which the therapist assured me was healthy. Real forgiveness couldn't be rushed or demanded. My journey through guilt and grief was complicated. There were days I questioned every decision, nights I lay awake, cataloging missed opportunities to have intervened earlier. Dr. Bennett helped me understand that self-forgiveness wasn't about excusing my failures, but about acknowledging them and committing to change. "You can't undo the past," she reminded me. "But you can create a different future." The turning point with Ethan came unexpectedly. 6 months into our separation, he asked if I would look at his art portfolio, something he had never willingly shared before. The collection revealed his inner world in ways words never could. Dark introspective pieces gave way to more hopeful images charting his emotional journey. "These are extraordinary," I told him truthfully. "You have real talent." He shrugged, but I could see the pleasure in his eyes. "My art teacher thinks I should apply to summer programs at the Art Institute." "I think that's a wonderful idea. Would you like help with the application?" He nodded, and we spent the evening researching programs together. It was the most natural interaction we'd had in years. A week later, Ethan told me he wanted to come out as gay to his father. He had already shared this with me months earlier in a casual conversation that had felt like a gift of trust. Jackson's likely reaction terrified me, but I promised Ethan my unwavering support. "Whatever happens, I'll be right there with you," I assured him. "And I'm proud of you for living your truth." The conversation went exactly as poorly as we had feared. Jackson alternated between denial. "It's just confusion from all the therapy nonsense," blame. "This is what happens when boys don't have proper male guidance," and anger. "No son of mine will live that lifestyle." For the first time, I didn't attempt to smooth things over or find middle ground. Instead, I stood firmly beside Ethan. "This isn't about you, Jackson. This is who Ethan is, and he deserves support and love, not judgment. If you can't provide that, you'll be the one missing out on a relationship with your remarkable son." We left together, Ethan quiet but standing taller than I had seen in years. In the car, he finally spoke. "You really stood up to him." "I should have done it years ago," I replied. The court proceedings dragged on with custody evaluations and financial disclosures consuming enormous energy. Jackson's initial advantage of financial resources was gradually balanced by documentation from therapists and school counselors regarding the children's improved well-being in my care. Setting boundaries with Jackson remained challenging. He would call at all hours, demand schedule changes at the last minute, and use Lily as a messenger for information that should have been communicated directly to me. Each violation required a firm response without escalation, a balance I struggled to maintain. "You need to tell Dad yourself that I can't come this weekend," Lily complained after one particularly difficult exchange. "I don't want to be in the middle." She was right, of course. I had unconsciously allowed her to continue her role as family mediator, another pattern that needed breaking. As months passed, I built a community of supportive friends, other teachers, parents from the children's schools, members of my support group. This network provided practical assistance, emotional support, and periodic reminders that isolation had been part of the problem in my marriage. Our first holiday as a restructured family felt both strange and liberating. The children divided their time between households, with Christmas Eve at my apartment and Christmas Day at Jackson's house. Our celebration was modest compared to previous years' handmade decorations, a small tree, simple gifts, but also warmer and more genuine. Ethan's forgiveness came gradually in small moments rather than grand declarations. He began joining me for morning coffee before school, sharing details about his day, without prompting asking my opinion on his art projects. Each small interaction rebuilt the trust I had broken. The moment that marked a true turning point came late one night when I found him still awake, sketching in the living room. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, sitting beside him on the couch. He shook his head. "Thinking about stuff." "Want to talk about it?" He set his sketchbook aside. "I was remembering something from when I was little, maybe 7 or 8. Dad got really mad because I spilled juice on the carpet. He was yelling and I was crying, and you came in and cleaned it up and told me it was no big deal, just an accident." I remembered the incident vaguely, one of countless similar moments. "After Dad left," Ethan continued, "you hugged me and said accidents happen, that's why they call them accidents. But then you made me promise not to tell Dad you said that." The memory stung with its truth. "I was trying to comfort you," I said softly. "But I was also teaching you to hide your feelings and keep secrets." Ethan nodded. "For a long time, I thought that's what love was, saying one thing in public and another in private, never really knowing what was true." "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I know," he said simply. Then after a pause, "I'm proud of you, Mom." The unexpected statement brought tears to my eyes. "For what?" I managed to ask. "For changing, for leaving, for admitting you were wrong. That's hard stuff." Coming from my son, the child I had failed to protect for so many years, those words offered healing I hadn't known was possible. Ethan and I began volunteering together at an arts program for elementary school children, finding common purpose in nurturing creativity in a supportive environment. Watching him gently encourage a shy 8-year-old reminded me of the sensitive child he had been, a child whose natural empathy had been treated as weakness rather than strength. The journey of repair continues daily. Some damage cannot be undone. Ethan still struggles with anxiety. Lily still seeks approval through achievement and charm. I still sometimes hear Jackson's critical voice in my head when making decisions. But we are building something new, a family based on honesty, rather than appearances, on authenticity, rather than roles, on accountability, rather than excuses. I've learned that real love doesn't mean keeping the peace at all costs. It means creating safety through truth and boundaries. Protection isn't about shielding children from all pain, but standing with them as they face difficulties. My son's words, "You protected everyone but me," will always echo in my memory, a painful reminder of years spent prioritizing the wrong things. But they also marked the beginning of a different story. One where protection means standing firm rather than smoothing things over, where accountability replaces excuses, where peace comes from honesty rather than silence. Have you ever had a moment where someone's words completely changed how you saw yourself? A moment that forced you to confront uncomfortable truths about your choices? If you have, please share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more authentic conversations about family dynamics and personal growth. Remember that it's never too late to break destructive patterns and begin healing. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage on your own path to authentic relationships.